Welcome to Wash Talk, the Carwash Podcast. I'm your host, Rich DiPaolo, and joining me today is John Waters of Waters Business Consulting Group. John, welcome to Wash Talk.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful to be part of this podcast and share any knowledge or wisdom that I may have gained over the years. Of course, we know that that knowledge is gained through a multitude of mistakes that are made.
Can't gain knowledge without mistakes, right, John?
Right.
So we're about a week removed from the SCWA show in Fort Worth, Texas, and the board at SCWA and Chuck and Jane Space certainly did a great job again this year putting on that show. But I was honored enough to be asked to moderate the closing panel of that event. And in my opening remarks, I mentioned how successful car washes focus on people, processes, and the product of clean, dry, and shiny. So that people element or the employees is certainly crucial. A lot of employees are customer facing. They're really the face of the car wash, even office staff answering calls and customers' questions. So it's really important, John, to maintain and build a winning culture at a car wash these days. So I know that's something that you've focused on over the years and helping car washes build. So my first question is, why is it important to create a winning culture at a car wash today?
Yeah, great question, Rich. A little bit of self-confession. Years ago, I've been doing business for 35, 36 years, and my own consulting company for 15, going on 16 years. In my early days of business, I would have thought, culture, that's what's important about culture, right? We get people, just get to work. It's all about the strategy and what we're delivering. The reality is, as you know, and we know, and I've learned and have fully adopted and accepted over the last 15, 20 years, and even more so, is culture is everything. Peter Drucker said it best, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'm a strategy guy, but I push culture up front. And the reason that is so true is that if you have the right culture, people do the right thing regardless. And it's not just a matter of morals and ethics. It's about the common objective that you're trying to achieve. It's, guys, this is what we do because it's the right thing to do for our customers, our clients, whatnot. So culture prevails without a doubt. Now, strategy is important. The interesting thing about culture is culture stems from leadership. So if I'm in an organization and they're saying we've got a really rotten culture or we've got some challenges with our culture, like, why do you think that is? I'll ask some questions. I say, ultimately, culture stems from leadership. You're feeding that culture. So one of my mentors put it best. Whether you know what your culture is or you don't know what your culture is, you have a culture. So it's important to identify and understand what that culture is and how you can help that culture thrive. So yes, culture is critically important because how you treat your employees, the people who support the products and services that you're delivering, in this case, car washes, is how they will respond to your customers.
Yeah, so important even when the manager's looking or not looking. And as you mentioned, everybody has a culture, whether it's a good one or not, that's the deciding factor. So let's go out on a limb, John, and say this first couple of minutes of the podcast here, we've convinced operators, okay, they need to have a culture. It's a very important thing. How does a car wash owner or manager initially set the expectations among the team members when looking to instill a good, solid culture at their business?
So when you say set the expectations, I'm assuming you're almost referring to kind of what the core values are in terms of that culture. Because the makeup of culture really becomes the core values. Core values are family, health, fun, financial literacy. I've got a whole list of these that we send our clients. There's 500 of them when you could narrow down. because people are like, core values, I'm not sure what mine are. There's just hundreds of these that are out there. Once you narrow down what your core values are, what you want to monitor are the behaviors. So what we'll consult with our clients about doing, what I would say with a car wash is identify your core values, 5 to 7 at the most of what's important to you. In our culture, accountability certainly is important. Integrity, sense of urgency is important to us. Individuals that take initiative are important to us. So then the question is, how do you model those? What's the behavior? So what we did then is tied to that. These are the behaviors we're looking for. Now, here's the real test for me as a leader, for you as a leader. How am I modeling those core values? That's true leadership. True leadership starts with modeling the way is what is said. So I'm borrowing from some other experts besides myself. So that's the first thing to do is establish what those core values are, discuss what those core values are regularly in your meetings, and then the leadership has to ensure that they carry out those core values.
Okay,
in terms of how their behaviors. And then, by the way, reward the team when they do things that are where the behavior is indicative of the core value.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next follow-up question here is what are the most effective ways to reinforce and maintain a positive team culture after implementation? So after you've implemented, how do you keep it going for months, years, decades, so on and so forth? And does that strategy change at all in a high turnover industry such as car washing?
Yeah, and I've got some really good additional pieces of information and examples on car washes specifically. I've got a good friend and one of the owners of a car wash actually in Austin, Texas. They started a car wash, and they may have been at your conference. They started a car wash here in Arizona, grew that, and then sold off. And they built an incredible culture in the car wash industry, to the extent that when they sold their business here, they couldn't compete here, so they went to Austin. That's why they opened up in Austin. A lot of the people that worked for them here migrated to Austin. They said, I want to work for that. That's a good culture, right? So how do you continue to reinforce it? One of the there's a lot of different ways. Leadership has to reinforce it is one of the best ways. When you see someone doing something, I just sent an email this morning, responded to someone who has been the individuals with this client are continually on point with the work they're doing and responding and carrying it out. I said, I appreciate what you guys are doing. That being able to compliment, a pat on the back or a thank you, or listen, I want to take you to lunch to show my appreciation, goes a long way. We've all worked for that boss that didn't, and we worked for the boss who said, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. And so, we can all do a better job of that. But that is one of the keys of leadership. And leadership isn't just the owner, because you've got ownership and then you've got individuals in leadership. If they're carrying those out and reinforcing the behaviors on a regular basis, the second way you can do it, you can promote that in meetings. Literally just say, hey, by the way, we want to make an example of John or Bob, who recently went out of their way to do this for a customer or a client or a coworker. And we want to thank them for that. And maybe it's a gift certificate, but it's acknowledging that. So the key is to reward. It doesn't have to necessarily be a monetary reward, but certainly any type of an actual accolade or some type of reward can go a long way. You can take it as far as saying, hey, our reward board for core value behaviors, there's a lot of different ways you can do it that we've done with clients. We're big into peer accountability. And one of the great examples of that is in sports teams, right? There is the team that is selfish and they want to get their shots, their scores, their rebounds, their whatever. And then there's the team that says, we just care about winning. So whatever we have to do as a team to win is what we do. That's the same example you want in a culture in a car wash, is everybody helps each other out. I mentioned this one company, and there was a short example they gave of one of their employees went above and beyond with a customer. And this is an example of doing what's right if you have the right culture. Lady takes her car through the car wash, and she comes back and she says, "Oh my gosh, uh, I think it was a watch or a ring. I think it was a ring she lost, and it was in the car, and they uh, they couldn't find it. They looked throughout the car, and they believe what happened was it was thrown out in one of the bins. One of the employees got into the garbage bin and dug through the garbage to eventually find it. And she was so elated that she was crying and shared with this person how much she appreciated. But that's the example of going, instead of going, well, I'm sorry about your loss, they went the extra mile. And that, by the way, that's that car wash I'm referring to is the one that sold here and went to Austin, that it was their employee. Those are the type of employees that they raise up. They have employees that started out on the line and are now managing an entire car wash.
That's so awesome. And yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure stories like that happen in the car wash industry on a daily basis and rarely get mentioned. So that's great to hear. But to your earlier point, John, the sum is greater than the parts, right? So the old cliche of one bad apple can spoil a bunch, and a bad culture is maybe just as contagious or more contagious than a good culture if you have employees that aren't buying in, right? So which strategies can be employed to hold employees accountable to adhering to the standards? And if you have an employee that is not buying in, how do you handle those situations if you're a manager or an operator?
Yeah, and of course that happens. We'd like to believe that every person that we hire it fits the core values and fits into the culture very well and adds to the culture, right? The last thing we want is an employee that detracts from the culture. The key is again, I go back to the beginning. You got to understand what your core values are and what kind of culture you're trying to develop. Because we can all say we just want a good culture. Well, define. And I often ask people, what kind of culture is it you're looking for? So I get a feel for where they're at. Tell me about your core values to see if they're aligned. But let's assume that we hire someone. I'm going to answer the question how we move individuals out. If their behaviors are not aligned with the core values and the culture, you have to sit down and have that one-on-one with that individual and say, listen, your behaviors simply are not conducive with our core values and culture. As hard as that is, but we need you to understand that you have an opportunity to change this. If not, then you've made a choice as to what direction you want to go. And it may not be here. It may be someplace else where it's a culture that better fits you. But you have to have that conversation. So that's the key. Now, those individuals, if they turn around and they perform well, then you want to compliment, say, hey, listen, I've noticed that your behaviors are aligning now with our culture. I appreciate that you've made the effort. That's the key, right? That doesn't happen, and it's something that we all have to do a better job reinforcing that. So I think that answers what you do with someone who's not. And the other part of your question was reinforcing it,
right? Reinforcing it amongst the teams. Yep, guys.
Yeah, amongst the team. So I mentioned earlier about the peer accountability, and I like to have transparency. In essence, I like to share openly when people are living out the core values, examples, and say, I want to share where Jason did this act, and that's an example of one of our core values. He helped another employee. So those are openly sharing those in meetings, which just reinforces the importance of it. One of the examples I often use is when it comes to behaviors. We've all gotten on the freeway and we're either driving too fast or we go, but that's, I know it's 65, but everyone's going 75, right? And the example I have is, the minute they reinforce it is when we change our behaviors, right? And I'm guilty of it, right? And I said, well, so the minute all of a sudden I see that there's, one of those lights or those boxes or camera, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to watch what I'm doing here. So it is the same different, but the key to this is you've got to reinforce good behaviors just as much as you've got to manage behaviors that aren't in alignment with your core values and culture.
Yeah, just one final question for you, John, and we'll get you off the hot seat. Such an important topic here, but once you've established a good culture and you have a good culture, how do you make sure you're bringing in the right new employees to fit into the culture? Is there anything in the interview process where you can weed out the people who might not be a fit? What advice do you give to folks there?
Yeah, another great question, Rich. Interview process, my goodness, we'd all like it to be as scientific as possible. And, you go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and yep, that's a perfect fit. And there is science out there. There are organizations, there are assessments that continually try to figure out people. This is the crazy thing about building a business is it takes four components. You need people, the right strategy, the ability to execute it, and capital. So of all those, you can have a strategy and you can have capital, but you can't execute it without people. I can have a car wash. I can't serve the customers without people. The challenge is that people are messy. That's just the way we're made, right? And so we all have those issues that have to be managed and challenged. And so it's really, when you filter the type of individuals you're trying to bring into your organization, it's critical that this is why the core values are so critical, that you filter through those core values. And there's ways you can go about that. You can ask those. One, you can put it in the ad. We're looking for people who are hungry, humble, enjoy a fit lifestyle, enjoy serving people, those types of examples. So, and we've helped businesses define or craft their message in terms of an ad. And I've had prospective employees, we've asked them, hey, what caught your attention? They said the ad was very specific and it caught my attention. So then what you do is you tend to partially filter those in. Then the next step is during the interview, you're asking those questions. Tell me what are some of your core values? And sometimes you have to prompt them and give them help to understand, because people are like, let's see, honesty, it's the same one. So you really try to give them an idea and push them to come up with 4 or 5 or 6 core values. Have them dig deep to understand, and have them give examples of a time that core value was on display. So ask situational questions. Give me an example of a time when are really good questions. And then another approach is assessments. You can do assessments that give you a better idea of their behavioral profiles. There's DISC, and there are other types of assessments. I've got a gentleman, and it has a derivative of DISC. It's called blind spots. And what you're trying to understand is the makeup of the individual. Are they going to fit our environment? And then finally, one of the things I do, if they've gone through those 3 screenings, I have them meet with the staff, key people on the staff, made up of minimum 3 up to 5, 7, who have a group interview, and it's really just a matter of them allowing the candidate to get to know the team, and the team to say to determine are they a fit or not. That way, if they're a fit, the team will embrace that individual and work to develop that individual. If they're not a fit, they'll call them out. They say they won't fit our culture. And then there's one other piece that you can do up front that I've worked with clients on. Those are all kind of through the interview, but you can even do a screening at the front end where they go to where let's say they respond to an ad and it says before you respond, and if you have interest before you respond, go to this link on our website. And on that link would be a video with ownership talking about the business, their core values, and what's important. And really be specific about what we're not and what we are. And I've had clients do that, and it weeds out people. That way you only get the individuals that fit. And then from there, they can jump to what's called an FAQ that answers certain questions about your organization. Again, what we are, what we're not. Do we have benefits? Do we not? Some of those things. That helps. That's more of a kind of an HR process, but it does help to weed out and still identify those core values. And then you back into what I just mentioned, that is making sure that the questions you ask are around the core values. So there are a lot of steps that you can do to filter out and ultimately get to the type of individual you're looking for. I've often done this too with a client is you bring them on board and you say, we're going to do a 30-day kind of an internship. We're going to do a 30-day, kind of trial. And what we're doing is we're going to pay you during that time, but we want to see if you're actually a fit for the organization. It's really a courting process, if you will. And we found that could be effective.
All right, understood. Well, I'll just throw in my 2 cents in there is that the owners really need to be in constant communication, and that's key here is communication with the employees. The owner might feel like they have a winning culture instilled, but maybe it's one that's not working for the employees, and they're just kind of going through the motions. So a lot of times maybe the owner needs to rethink about the culture, maybe go back to the drawing board if it's a culture that's not working for everybody on the team. So effective communication with the team members, I'm sure, is something that you stress as well to your clients. So appreciate you taking some time. I enjoyed our interview, John. I know you've contributed to professional car washing and detailing and carwash.com in the past, and we certainly appreciate that. And you're welcome back on Wash Talk anytime, John.
I appreciate it, Rich. Thank you very much. You have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.